Alright, so let's get started. So in this scene I have created a little snowman, so I have him in a rest position here, which means that he's not moving at all, and then I have him doing this little wobble. And I also have this terrain, which is just a grid with some noise applied. So the first thing we need to do is to get this snowman to be an agent. So let's drop down a geometry, call this agent setup. And in here, I'm going to drop down an agent sub. And as you might recall from the previous course, you can just use this and point to subnet. So I can just point to snowman rest here. And then suddenly I have this snowman in a rest pose. And I'm going to call this rest here. One problem though is that with this method I can only get one of the clips. Either the rest pose or the wobble. If I would try to add a clip to the agent by dropping down an agent clip, you can see that the only option I have here is either from chop or from file. So one way to get around this is doing this little trick. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna copy him, call this wobble, then I'm gonna point that to the wobble animation. So here is my wobble animation, but now I have two separate agent primitives. And I just want to have them combined as one agent with two clips. But what I can do is I can create a chop network. I can go in here, drop down an agent. I can point to this wobble and select the wobble. So now if I look in here in the motion FX view, then you can see that I get all the animation curves. So what you can do then is just go back to agent clip, use this chop, go into the chop and select the agent here, and then call this wobble. So what I'm doing is to extract animation curves from one of the agents through chops, and then create a clip for the other agent by pointing to that chop network. You can see I have the rest and the wobble. Perfect. So let's put down an null, and call this out agent. I'm going to call this black. Great. Alright, so now it's that done. So let's create the crowd. I'm gonna turn on the terrain here. And I want the crowd to be only in this little valley. So I can go into a drop down another geometry. Call this crowd layout. If I go in here, I can do an object merge and point to the terrain. And I'm gonna do another object merge. So I'm gonna call this terrain here. And then I'm gonna have the agent, and then I'm gonna point to this agent setup and out agent. Actually gonna move it like this instead. Right, cool. First I'm gonna select the terrain, I'm gonna drop down a paint, go to background, apply black to all. Just also gonna hide so I don't see the terrain from outside. And then I'm gonna make sure that this tool is selected, and then I'm gonna just paint into here. Like so. I'm going to drop down a scatter now. All of this is of course things that you have seen before, so I'm just going to lay down everything really quickly here. For the density, I'm going to use CD, so now I have that. I don't want the color, attribute delete. And then I run CD here. I need a crowd source. This crowd source is going to take the agent, and it's going to take the points I just created, like so. And here are all my agents, maybe less agents, like 200. And let's go to the crowd source and go to randomize and randomize the clip time. Out crowd. One thing I forgot to do is I also want to create some loop properties. So if we turn this off first and look at the snowman, turn this off. This animation has a loop range that basically is around 87, so 1 to 87. If we go back to agent setup, and then gonna drop down an agent clip property, and then we can select the wobble, loop range 1 to 87. Then I'm gonna make an out properties, like so. And the last step to have a working crowd is to drop down a DOP network. So let's have a DOP network. I'm gonna call this crowd sim. Go in here, crowd solver, and a crowd object, and a crowd source. Oh, and a crowd state too. First connect this, the crowd object in here, crowd source in the second, and the state to the third. State I'm going to call wobble. Let's first go to crowd source and select the crowd and go to the first frame. So here's the crowd, and here is the wobble. I can select the wobble clip. It actually would, because now we're saying $OS, it would still pick up the wobble clip, but just to make sure I selected it here instead. And in the crowd object I can go to clip properties and then point to the clip properties here. So out properties, and if we don't want them to move like this, let's put this to locomotive. Actually, then they're not going to move. Just going to be in their little position here. Perfect. Alright, let's finish up by setting the initial state, and in some versions of Houdini it will break the agent if it's not set. So if we look at it, we have our terrain and we have a lot of wobbly snowmans. So in the next lesson, let's build some collision shapes for these guys.